All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to give everybody a second to get logged in here. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. So we'll give everybody a second to log in and get situated, and then we'll get going. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. My name is Matthew Tratner. I'm the Director of Global Business Development with GIA. And I want to welcome everybody to this webinar that we're doing with AGS, and thank AGS and the team at GIA for putting all of this together. And also, we really just want to take a second to just say that we hope everyone that's watching, that you and your loved ones are all safe and healthy. As we're going through this unprecedented time. You know, at GIA, we are all overwhelmed with gratitude for the scientists, the doctors, the nurses, the first responders, and the volunteers that are all working so hard to keep everybody safe. We know it's a trying time for everyone. We're glad that we can offer you this hour of distraction and knowledge. And we're very excited to start talking about diamond science. I am here, as I said a minute ago, I'm Matthew Tratner, Director of Global Business Development with GIA, and I'm here with my colleague who I love working with, and very fortunate to have her today, Dr. Smit, one of our researchers. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw it over to Karin. She will introduce herself, and then we'll get into diamond science. So Dr. Smit, take it away.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So as Matt mentioned, we're going to be talking quite a bit about natural diamonds and their origin. So just to introduce myself, I'm a research scientist at the Gemological Institute of America. I have been at GIA since 2014. Prior to that, I did my PhD at the University of Alberta. I specialized in diamond geology, so trying to understand where diamonds form, how they form, and also how old they are. And so we'll be getting into quite a bit of those topics today in the webinar.
I just want to tell everybody that as we go along, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in to the Q&A. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all the questions at the end of the presentation. So with that, why don't we get going? And why don't we start with really a basic question, Dr. Karin? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what diamonds are?
So diamonds are mostly carbon. So they are chemically equivalent to graphite. So graphite is the low pressure form of carbon that we all know really well, you know, like in our pencils or whatever. Diamonds are exactly the same composition. However, it is just a different mineral that forms at higher pressures. So where graphite is stable at low pressures at the Earth's surface, diamond is stable at higher pressures in the Earth's interior. So this is just to really show the pressure and temperature conditions at which graphite and diamond are stable at. So this just shows that diamond and graphite are both comprised of carbon, but they're in slightly different configurations, which gives them different physical properties, and that is why they are different minerals. And so this pressure temperature graph here on the left-hand side also just shows the main lab-grown diamonds, HPHT, or high pressure, high temperature diamonds, and CVDs, or chemical vapor deposition diamonds. And so these are exactly the same as a natural diamond, the same composition and the same crystal structure. However, they're just grown in a lab setting and not in a natural setting. But really, they're the same mineralogy, and they have exactly the same physical properties and the same composition. But that is not what we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're going to be focusing on the origin of natural diamonds.
And so now that you've told us what they are, and why don't we talk a little bit about how they form in the earth, like you know, where they form, how deep they form.
So on this slide, I've just started by showing just a few images of rough diamonds, because I think a lot of people in the trade or the public, we know diamonds, you know, when we think of diamonds in our jewelry. And I don't think many people are familiar with what rough diamonds may look like. So I've shown a few examples of sort of the rough diamond shapes. And so the majority of diamonds are sort of these octahedral shapes. But they also have these beautiful trigons on the surface as well. And they come in many different colors as well. So as a geologist, and because of my earth science background, I way prefer rough diamonds to, you know, cut and faceted diamonds, simply because they show so many more features that you can see in cut stones. So where do these diamonds actually form? I mentioned that they form deep in the earth. And so the earth below the surface is made up of a few different regions. So we start off with a crust, that's the outermost portion of the earth. And then we go deeper down, we get to what's called the mantle, and then the core. So the majority of diamonds are forming in the upper mantle. So here on the right-hand side, we can see just sort of a rough schematic showing where these diamonds are forming. So the majority of natural diamonds form in this region here, which is below cratons. So cratons is a really old portion of the Earth's crust. So if you take the oldest rocks on Earth, they are stable for at least 2.5 to 3 billion years. The reason that they are this stable is because below them, there's a region called the Cratonic lithosphere. And it is in this region that we have the optimal pressure and temperature conditions for natural diamond formation. So you may also have heard, my colleague Evan Smith has studied what's known as clipper diamonds and also large rare blue diamonds. So these form much deeper in what's known as the transition zone and also in the lower mantle. So these are much larger and they're blue, colorless, highly pure, rare diamonds. But the majority of diamonds that we see at the Earth's surface today actually forms sort of in these cratonic regions. And so the pressures that these diamonds are forming at, so we're talking about depths, depth below the surface of the Earth. So that's like 150, 200 kilometers down. But the pressures that this is equivalent to is 5 to 6 gigapascals. And so my colleague Evan Smith once again did this sort of rough calculation that shows that these pressures are equivalent to sort of 80 elephants stepping on your big toe. So that is a massive amount of pressure. And that is also the pressure conditions that they're using to create high pressure, high temperature diamonds in the lab.
Now, Evan hasn't done a field test on this, has he, Karin?
No, I'm not sure if Evan knows how to coordinate the elephants to on his big toe, but this was just sort of a rough calculation that he did.
So if in perspective, like if we're talking about how deep within, you know, these cratons that these diamonds form, just to give everybody kind of an idea of how deep we're talking about, let's say we were to like flip the switch on that. And if you were to give us a comparison with how high, let's say you'd have to go off the Earth in order to get to where diamonds would form, how high are we talking about, just to give everybody a perspective idea?
So commercial airlines, I'm told, fly at around 10, 11 kilometers above the Earth's surface. And so multiply that by 15. So like 15 times the height that commercial airlines are flying, that's how deep you need to go to get to the region where these lithospheric diamonds are forming.
Wow. So, okay, so then that's, I mean, so that's, you know, obviously very deep. So then how do they then get to the surface if they're so deep?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So these diamonds are forming below our feet at depths that we can't get to, like it's in the inaccessible Earth. And so we need a mechanism to get the diamonds from deep in the Earth up to the Earth's surface. And that is where kimberlites come in. So kimberlites are a very rare type of volcanic eruption. So they come from deep in the Earth, 200 kilometers down. And as they explode up through the diamond-bearing regions of the mantle, they bring up with them a lot of diamonds and other mantle rocks. And so these eruptions, sorry, are very explosive. So they're thought to reach the surface of the earth in a matter of hours or maybe up to 1 or 2 days. So they're traveling very, very quickly. And because of that immense speed, they were able to bring up these large chunks of rocks from the deep earth. So the other important thing here to note is that they're extremely rare. So these aren't sort of the volcanic eruptions that we think of today that occur sort of on the west coast of America or in Iceland or these places. These are very rare volcanic eruptions. And the last eruption of this kind that actually became a diamond mine occurred 20 million years ago. And this is a deposit in Australia known as Ellendale.
Sorry, I wanted to ask you, so Kimberlite sounds like a very kind of mineral name. Does the name have anything to do with any of the materials that are being brought up?
So Kimberlite is actually named for the town of Kimberley in South Africa, where it was first found. So prior to the discovery of diamonds in South Africa, the majority of diamonds were being mined in alluvial settings. So this is where the volcanic rocks were being eroded, and then people were panning for diamonds sort of in streams and such. So the first place where they actually found the primary source rock for diamonds was in South Africa, in a region that became the town of Kimberley. And this is why the rock became known as Kimberlite, because it is the rock that is found in this region. And so that just sort of became the type locality for Kimberlite rock.
And that's very interesting, because I guess it could have been anywhere, right? So that at least the name was catchy and it stuck.
Could have been New Yorkite, but
yeah, right, exactly. Now I see at the bottom of the slide, and you mentioned this briefly, that it brings deep earth materials to the Earth's surface. So can you talk a little bit more about these other types of materials? Are any of these other materials that come up sort of as sought after as diamonds, or have that kind of value that, let's say, a diamond does?
Well, yeah, so I think potentially diamond would be the only piece of material that has any sort of commercial value. But to scientists, the other material that comes up with the Kimberlites are scientifically invaluable, because it teaches us so much about the deep earth, and we have no way to go down and investigate the deep earth. So the deepest drill hole has only made it into the crust. No one has even managed to drill into the mantle. And so the only way that scientists can get access and get direct samples from the deep earth is through diamond mining. And so I've just 2 pictures to illustrate this. On the left, there's a rough diamond that is hosted in Kimberlite. So this is what one of these volcanic rocks look like. And then on the right-hand side is what we call a xenolith. So xenolith and xenocrystal, if you don't know what these terms mean, so xeno is foreign and lith is rock. So it's a foreign piece of rock that has been brought up with the Kimberlite. So this is a colorful rock known as an eclogite. So it has garnet and it has clinopyroxene. And so Kimberlites and diamond mining actually allow scientists access to materials that we wouldn't get in any other way.
And now you mentioned before that these are pretty rare, but and the last one you said being about 20 million years ago, which, you know, that's pretty rare. So then is it easy to go ahead and find where the Kimberlite is coming to the surface and start mining it? Is that something that's a pretty simple process?
Yeah, so the exploration and exploration of Kimberlites actually take a long time. To find a new deposit could take a decade or more. So you need to start off by going to regions where you know that there would be Kimberlites. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we know that diamonds are restricted to portions of the Earth's crust that are really old, that are known as cratons. And so this is just an image that I took from Shirey and Shigley in Gems and Gemology. And so it shows the geographical distribution of what is known as cratons. And so all these regions sort of in brown are these cratonic regions. So here in South Africa, we have the Kaapvaal or the Kalahari craton, where a lot of diamond mines are occurring. Here in Australia is the Kimberley craton, where you have Argyle and Ellendale. The Canadian diamond mines were first discovered here in the Slave Craton in the Northwest Territories. So we know that diamond mines are restricted to cratonic regions. And so the first place that you're going to go if you want to start up a new exploration program is to go to an area that is part of a craton. So you're not going to go to Iceland, you're not going to go to the UK to go look for diamonds. You need to start off in a cratonic region. And so then now you need to figure out easily and quickly where your kimberlites are. And so there's a few ways that people do that. One way is to do geophysical assessments. So you can look for anomalies when you do geophysical surveys. You look for magnetic anomalies where the kimberlites actually have a different signal to the other rocks in the area. And so you're able to pick out certain targets. And so then once you find these targets, then you need to establish whether it is in fact a kimberlite or not. And so then you need to actually do a core drilling program where you drill into your target to establish whether it is in fact a kimberlite or not. And then after that, you need to establish whether it has any diamonds or not. And so it ends up being a very, very long process. So there's many kimberlites that do not have any diamonds or do not have sufficient diamonds to actually become an economic diamond mine. So even after you find the kimberlite and you establish that they are diamonds, there's still a lot of work that needs to go into establishing a bulk sampling program where you can establish what the diamond grade of that particular kimberlite is and whether it is worthwhile to go ahead and mine it.
That's really amazing, because if you think about it, I mean, we've only had a certain amount of technology around for a while, but diamond mining has been around for a long time. So they were operating with sort of not a lot of technology to be able to tell them if they were in the right place.
Well, so I was just talking about, sort of the one way that you can do exploration is based on the geophysical surveys. Another way is to actually do stream sediment sampling. And so we know that there's, I'm just going to go back a slide. We know that there's other minerals from these rocks that occur alongside with diamonds. And so if you are in a region that you think is prospective for diamonds, you can do sampling of many of the indicator minerals for diamonds. So we know that minerals with certain compositions are always going to occur alongside with diamonds. And so if you are in a region that you think is prospective for diamonds, you can do a combination of a geophysical survey where you look for kimberlite targets, but you can also try to track down the kimberlites by doing sort of indicator mineral assessments, where you look at the minerals that are occurring in different stream settings or in paleo stream settings to sort of establish if there are diamond-friendly minerals in this region.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. I don't think people realize what is involved in the process. That's just to even get to the rough. We're not even talking about what happens after, to get it all the way to a polished stone. I mean, this process is just truly, it's awesome, actually.
Yeah, and so I think it really does emphasize how rare natural diamonds are, because the exploration and bulk sampling takes a number of years, and you also need investment in order to be able to do that. So we haven't even talked about the capital that's needed in order to run these exploration and bulk sampling programs.
Right. I mean, it's just, if you think about the science, the equipment, and everything else, it's very capital heavy. So let's go on to the next slide, and then we can talk a little bit about where diamonds are now, where they're active, more specifically.
Yeah, so the next few slides I just have to show a few of the regions that are involved in our Diamond Origin program. So we have a few of the countries. So the first one is the Diavik mine from northern Canada. So this is where the Diavik and Ekati mines were where diamonds were first discovered in Canada. And so this was around 30 years ago now. And so next year in northern Canada in Yellowknife, we're going to have the International Kimberlite Conference, which is going to celebrate the 30-year anniversary of the discovery of diamonds in Canada. So that's pretty cool. And so here is just one example of some of the impressive diamonds that are coming out of Diavik. So this is a 552 carat rough diamond that was mined at Diavik recently. And so we were lucky to have the opportunity to study that at GIA. Another region that is involved in our program is Russia. So we have, this is the Lomonosov mine in northwestern Russia. The majority of diamonds in Russia actually occur sort of on the eastern side of the country in Siberia. However, this is in northwestern Russia, and I was lucky enough to go visit it a number of years ago. This is a relatively, this opened relatively recently. As you can see from the depth of the pit, it's not nearly as deep as some of the other mines. And what's interesting about this deposit is it actually is a source of pink diamonds. And so just here in this image here, just shown they have a variety of colored diamonds that they are producing, but there's also a number of pink diamonds that are coming from Lomonosov as well. And then another mine or another country that's part of our program is the Botswanan diamond mines. So this is the Korowe mine in Botswana. Also, once again, I was lucky enough to go visit it a number of years ago. And the Korowe mine is perhaps most well known for producing these really large colorless diamonds. Wow. So here's just a selection of some of these diamonds. The Lacetti Llorona, which when it was still in its rough form was 1109 carats. And at GA, we were lucky enough to study a number of the diamonds coming from Korowe. And through spectroscopic analysis and through piecing the pieces together, we were able to establish that actually all of these diamonds on the slide here were once part of the same rough diamond. So we actually investigated them sort of at different times. They didn't come through the lab all at the same time, but through doing spectroscopic analyses on each of these pieces, we were able to establish that actually these pieces all fit together. And so they were a massive diamond, probably over 2,000 carats big. So, you know, Korowe is known for producing many of these sort of large, remarkable diamonds.
Well, this is incredible. I mean, the fact that that you and our researchers were able to figure that out is amazing. And in looking at this and knowing that, you know, these formed in the earth a very long time ago, do we have a sense of the timeline of when a diamond like this was formed?
Yeah, so these diamonds, we don't actually know how old they are, because in order to date a diamond, you need to get the inclusions out of the diamond. So you need to break the diamond, get the inclusions out. And so if you're holding a diamond in your hand, most likely you don't know how old it is because you haven't smashed it up to get the diamonds out, to get the inclusions out. So those studies have been done, but just on other diamonds. And so the next two slides, I'm just showing sort of a timeline just for how old diamonds are. And this is by no means an exhaustive list of all the diamond localities that have been studied for their age, but it's just to sort of give an overview of the range of ages and that diamonds have been forming almost all through Earth's history. So we're going to start off with the age of the Earth, which is 4.56 billion years old. The oldest rocks on Earth, sorry, I've just said old rocks and more old rocks. So the oldest rocks on Earth are from Canada, from Quebec and from the Northwest Territories, and they're over 4 billion years old. The oldest diamonds that have been studied, or the oldest diamonds that we know of, are also from Canada, the Ekati and Diavik diamonds. So they are the oldest diamonds that have been studied so far. So they're 3.5 to 3.3 billion years old. Potentially, if we study more diamonds, we could discover older diamonds. But so far, this is the record. And then the Kimberley diamonds, around 2.9. So these are diamonds from South Africa. And really just to show that the oldest diamonds were already forming before we even had oxygen in our atmosphere. So oxygen only became abundant around 2.5, 2.3 billion years ago. And so the oldest diamonds that we know of have been around since even before oxygen became abundant. But there are also younger diamonds, or geologically young diamonds. And so here's just sort of a range of diamonds that are slightly younger than sort of those extremes. The Argyle diamonds that formed around 1.6 billion years ago, and then the Zimi diamonds around 650 million years ago. And so once again, sort of the youngest diamonds that we know of are some diamonds from Koffiefontein and Jagersfontein in South Africa that formed around 90 to 60 million years ago. And so the youngest diamonds that we know of were forming even before the dinosaurs went extinct. So even though we geologists say these are young diamonds, they're still sort of on a human timescale, they're pretty old. So diamonds certainly are old. It just is a matter of like, well, how old do you mean? And so diamonds certainly have really interesting history because they span almost all of Earth's history, which is great because they can inform geologists about processes that have been happening in the Earth, in the deep Earth, sort of all the way back to Earth's earliest times. So they're an invaluable scientific sample, even if, you know, the diamonds that we study for dating purposes aren't the most commercially valuable, beautiful specimens. They still can tell us so much about the planet that we live on, and the processes that went on deep in the Earth.
I guess it's tough, right? Because to your point, people are not lining up to say to you, here's my diamond, you can destroy it for scientific purposes, take it and...
Yeah, no one's doing
that. So, okay, so now you've told us that we can't determine, you know, really the age so much, but, you know, can you determine where it comes from, the geographic origin?
So that's a little bit more tricky, actually, because sort of, as I mentioned in the beginning, a diamond is mostly made up of carbon. So it's an incredibly pure mineral. The next most common element in a diamond is nitrogen, and that occurs in parts per million concentration. So you may have, on average, you have about 1,000 ppm, so like 1 weight% of nitrogen sort of in a natural diamond. So that's very little, and that is the second most abundant element that you have in a diamond. So geographic origin for colored stones, on the other hand, so like rubies or sapphires, so those are both corundum, aluminium oxide, but there's a lot of trace elements in the corundum structure. So you have iron, vanadium, titanium. You have other elements that you can use and analyze to see what the difference is in composition between different localities. For diamonds, on the other hand, that's almost impossible to do because there's just nothing to analyze. Even if you wanted to analyze the trace elements in diamonds, it's incredibly difficult to do. At the moment, there's only one lab in the world that actually does routine analyses of trace elements in diamonds. This is at the University of Alberta, where I did my PhD. And the process is very laborious. So, you know, you have to spend a long time in the lab. You have to actually ablate the diamond for a number of hours, maybe over 10, maybe 30 hours, where you're ablating the diamond to get sufficient amount of material to actually analyze on the instrument. So you wouldn't be able to analyze trace elements in diamonds the same way you analyze trace elements in in corundum, for example. And then even the results that we have for diamonds so far, the trace element results that we have for diamonds so far, show us that for the most part, it all looks pretty similar. And so we haven't yet found some sort of tracer that we can use to distinguish one locality from another based on trace elements. So at the moment, it's still a pretty difficult thing to do. And we don't know if geographic determination would ever be possible for diamonds. It's just an unknown right now. However, we do know that, sort of certain localities have some distinguishing characteristics. So we know, some deposits, if you have a suite of diamonds from a particular deposit, you can see some similarities in their features, in their rough features. So there's a deposit in Zimbabwe, the Morange deposits, and we know that their rough diamonds all look very similar. We know that, the Argyle pink diamonds have particular characteristics. And so there are certain deposits where you, as a group, you can say that they have particular characteristics. But I think a lot of that information starts getting lost when you start cutting the stones and once it gets into the trade.
Okay, so if you can't necessarily determine the origin through that kind of analysis, can you tell us how GIA uses science to determine origin for the Diamond Origin program?
So to clarify, we don't actually determine origin for this report. So what GIA does is it's really a matching service. And so we need to look at the rough and we need to look at the polished, and then we compare their characteristics. And so the diamonds are submitted as a rough with a known origin. So we get them from the mines, we know what their origin is, we evaluate the diamond, we document all their characteristics, and then the polished is later submitted. And what we do is we match the diamond to the rough diamond that was previously submitted.
Okay, and I can actually, let me step in here because I can actually clarify to our audience exactly what happens behind that, because GIA is working with mines that are well established. They're owned by governments or publicly traded companies. They're subject to multiple regulations from their government, the Kimberlite process, and third-party organizations like the RJC, the Responsible Jewelry Council. So all rough that we get for the Diamond Origin program, it has to be submitted in a sealed, tamper-proof package that either comes directly from the mine or from a manufacturer with the Kimberlite, like I said, the Kimberlite process seal. And every manufacturer that we get rough and then gets polished and then resubmitted, we also give them a tracking number that comes from our rough analysis. So all of the rough that's coming into the program, we know exactly where it's coming from and have paperwork and other policies behind it to establish where it's coming from before the scientists get a hold of it. so okay, so now that we've got that process established, so and we know that there's a process that the scientists need to do in order to study the rough diamond. Can you talk a little bit about that process once it gets received?
Yeah, so I'll just talk through some of the analytical techniques that we use. I'm not going to give away our whole game here, but I'll talk through, just a few of the techniques that, that we do use to match sort of, the polished and to match that then with the rough. And so I'm just going to start just quickly explaining two of the main techniques. So the one is visible absorption. So the color of a diamond, we measure the spectrum. So we measure the visible absorption spectrum of the diamond to see what the color forming defects or the color forming impurities in the diamond is. And so here on the bottom, just showing the visible spectrum, sort of from 400 to around 700 nanometers. And we can see this spectrum here is for sort of this, this pink diamond. You can see there's a broad band centered around 550 nanometers. And so this is causing absorption sort of below 600 nanometers. And therefore the transmission window is in the warmer region of the spectrum. And that is what results in this color. The other technique that we use is infrared absorption. And so I've just shown sort of two spectra here. One is for a type 2A diamond. And for people that aren't familiar with the diamond typing terminology, type 2 just means that there is no detectable nitrogen in the infrared. And so in the spectrum, there's only diamond absorption. So all of this, the sort of the red curve here, all of this is absorption related to the diamond. So it's the intrinsic diamond infrared absorption. There's nothing else that we can see in the spectrum. So this is what is known as a type 2A or nitrogen poor diamond. Also showing a type 1 diamond where there is nitrogen detectable in the infrared spectrum. So we can see it has absorption related to the diamond once again. Great, it's a diamond. And then also that it has nitrogen. So this region here is related to nitrogen in its different forms. So these are sort of the two main spectroscopic techniques that we use when we match the rough with the polished.
Okay.
And so when these diamonds come in, we want to make sure that, you know, sort of the spectral features for the rough and the polished match up with each other. I mean, the diamond shouldn't have changed diamond type between submissions. I mean, you're not going to submit a type 2A rough and submit a type 1A polished. The diamond type obviously needs to match. And the size and color needs to match as well. You know, your diamond shouldn't get bigger after cutting. Preferably it should get smaller. And so that the size and the color are reasonable, you know, that they make sense. You know, your diamond hasn't changed color between submissions, and that the diamond size actually makes sense for the cutting process. And so just sort of two examples for sort of the data that was collected for two colorless stones, just sort of comparing the rough with the polished. So we started off here with a nearly 6 carat rough that became a 1 carat polished stone. And then, you know, we compared the visible absorption spectra for the rough with the polished. And so we see in this case that the spectra match really well. They both have these defects here at 415 and 476. So this is probably a Cape stone. So very common type of spectra that we see in diamonds. But the important thing is that the spectra for the rough and the spectra for the polished matches really well. In infrared, both of these diamonds contain lots of nitrogen. So they're both type 1A diamonds. The diamond hasn't changed diamond type between the two submissions, which is great. Unfortunately, a feature of many diamonds that have been cut is that we don't always get a really clear spectrum. And so a lot of this that you're seeing here is just instrument noise, because if the diamond contains too much nitrogen, it may saturate the detector and things like that. So it's not always possible to get, you know, a perfectly nice diamond spectrum or nitrogen spectrum for all the diamonds. But bottom line here is that, you know, they're both diamonds and they both have lots of nitrogen. But we also look at many other features of the spectrum as well. For example, we have a peak here at 3107, which contains nitrogen and hydrogen. So there's other features in the spectra that we look at as well. And so another example, once again, the diamond got smaller after it was cut, which is what we want to see. And sort of the spectra look very similar between rough and polished. In some cases, it may look slightly different between rough and polished simply because the beam is interacting with a different shaped stone. And so sometimes the spectra can look slightly different, but the features remain the same. So this is actually a type 2 diamond, meaning it has no detectable nitrogen. So there's sort of nothing in this region here. So no detectable nitrogen, meaning it's a type 2A diamond. There is, however, a very small peak over here that I'm going to zoom into on the next slide. So this once again is sort of the 3107 peak. So it's a tiny peak. It's only observable if you really zoom in. But these are all features that we're looking at in the lab when we sort of investigate the spectra for these stones. So even if, you know, over here, you know, you may not see much, we are actually looking at all the features of the spectra, even the ones that you have to, you know, sort of zoom in to see.
And so, and I would just be clear to everybody about the program, just so they know that if you're the company that is submitting the rough for analysis, and that analysis usually in normal times takes about 3 days to do, if our labs were open and operating. And then it doesn't really matter which company then submits the polish, because again, the science is behind it. And you guys are able to, through that analysis of both the rough and the polished, be able to determine whether or not that's a match. And what's the current percentage that we're running at as far as the ability to match rough to polished stone?
And so our internal matching rate is in the high 90s. So I think that like 97, 98% of stones that we are able to match to their rough.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So I first off, that information was very thorough and comprehensive and fantastic, and I think it really gave everybody you know, a great background on how diamonds form and how GIA is doing these types of analysis. We do have a couple of questions that I would love to throw at you. One of our audience members have asked, is anyone looking for new kimberlite eruptions today? Are they out actively prospecting for that?
Yes. So a lot of mining companies have exploration programs that they are actively looking for new kimberlites, and also doing bulk sampling on previously discovered kimberlites to investigate whether, you know, what their diamond grade is. So, for example, the Korowe mine in Botswana, it was actually discovered by De Beers in, I forget when exactly, but a while ago, I think in the 70s or 80s, it was discovered by De Beers. But at the time, the technology that was around at the time seemed to gave them the idea that it wasn't economic. So under the conditions at that time, it didn't seem that it was an economic kimberlite. And so the kimberlite was later re-investigated, and a new bulk sampling program was started, and further geophysics was done to really understand the deposit better. And so they were able to delineate the size of the kimberlite much better, and also to get a better handle on the diamond grade and the diamond sizes that were expected. And so that's a good example of, you know, you do exploration, you find a kimberlite, but you may put it on the back burner until later, because you have other deposits that you want to focus on first. And then you can always come back to that kimberlite later on and do additional testing and decide whether it now is an economic deposit or not. And so certainly exploration for kimberlites are always ongoing. It just depends sort of on the economic climate and whether companies can get the capital to do these sort of exploration programs.
Wow, thank you. Okay, somebody else, we have another question about, can you tell us why that a diamond, a rough and a polish might not match, even if, let's say, we're fully aware when they come into the lab that that this polished is from this rough?
Yeah, so I can sort of imagine a scenario where a diamond could be maybe slightly heterogeneous, meaning that it may have, you know, just slight, you may target one part of the diamond when you analyze the rough, but now you're cutting that off, and now you're analyzing a different part of the diamond when it's polished. And so that slight heterogeneity may mean that it doesn't match exactly. However, in general, the diamond type should still stay the same. And there's many other characteristics that we look at as well. We don't rely only on sort of the spectra that I showed here in this presentation. We also look at other characteristics of the diamonds. And so, yes, there are scenarios where I could see where if a diamond is slightly heterogeneous and you're not analyzing exactly the same spot between rough and polished, that you could have slight differences in the spectra.
Okay. So someone else is asking about the graphs that you were showing. Exactly what does that peak mean? What does that mean if you see those tiny peaks?
So these are absorption spectra. So I guess a sort of a really easy way to think of this is that the diamond is sort of holding back light. And so the light that is able to be transmitted is what results in the color. So these sort of bands here, so this broad band is the 550 nanometer band. We don't know what causes it. So this peak hasn't actually been identified, or this broadband hasn't been linked to a specific impurity sort of in the diamond. But actually I have some secret slides at the back that may explain this a little bit better. If I can get to them.
We love secret slides.
So yeah, so these are some color centers in diamond. And so we know that, you know, there are certain impurities or certain defects in a diamond that results in a particular color. So for example, pink and brown diamonds, we know are often associated with plastic deformation or brown graining. And so these vacancy clusters in the diamond lattice are often associated with, you know, sort of the pink or brown color. And so really, there are certain elements like nitrogen or just certain defects like a vacancy in the diamond lattice that cause light to be absorbed or held back in a different way. And so that is then the peak that we're seeing in the spectrum, is just light of a particular wavelength that's being absorbed.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think we've pretty much reached the end of our time. So let's go back to the that last slide. And I just want everyone to know that that is my email address there, mtratner@gia.edu. And if you have any additional questions about the Diamond Origin Report or about this presentation, then please feel free to email me. I will be working from home for the foreseeable future, so I will be around to answer those emails. And before we sign off, I think I want to say thank you to Dr. Karin again. Amazing presentation, and also from
home, so I've got nothing better to do.
And of course, again, from the two of us and everybody at GIA and AGS, we want to say to everybody, stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to all being together in the same room soon. So thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic weekend.